was a burst of yellow flame, and they quickly turned to ash.
Well, greetings from King Edward VII's Hospital for Officers and certain ladies who have incendiary information to impart. I was rung up by one of my friends who is rather well connected politically, and I was given the most extraordinary tip-off, which I have to tell you has had me spinning like a gig. And this puts a whole new complexion on the whole business of the Prince Andrew really fandango, because I mean it's obvious to everybody that there is something going on that, shall we say, doesn't match up with what is being promulgated in the popular press. Well, I'm going to start out by reading something from Lynn Smith and then do something by Amanda Lask, because these will provide really ideal introductions to the whole matter. Lynn Smith says, "You don't get it, Lady C. Andrew has put his family reputation in the toilet. William gets it." Well, William gets it. Charles gets it. Camilla gets it. Andrew gets it. Sarah gets it. And now I've got it. But let me now read out what Amanda Lask has to say. "What do you make of Camilla advising the king to cut Andrew loose?" Well, when you discover who the unnamed Prime Minister is, and it's not, as I had thought, Ehud Barak. Virginia Giuffre had previously named Ehud Barak, but it's not Ehud Barak to whom she was referring, because the word in parliamentary circles is that the person to whom she was referring was no other former Prime Minister than the former British Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Now, I have to at this stage say, for legal reasons, if no others, that I am not accusing Tony Blair of anything. There is ample evidence that Virginia Giuffre was quite a fantasist, and that she used to come up with inventions. So nobody is accusing Tony Blair of anything. And I need to make that absolutely clear for legal reasons, because I do not intend to have Tony Blair's advisors all over me like a rash, saying that I'm accusing him of anything. I'm not accusing him of anything. But this information came via a great friend of mine from one of Tony Blair's former, I'm not going to say whether it was a Minister of State or a Secretary of State, but it was a member of a Labour government at the absolutely highest level. So the Prime Minister concerned is not Ehud Barak. It is, sorry, I'm very uncomfortable. It is Tony Blair. And somebody who knows Tony Blair rather well said, and I'm going to quote, that the little bastard who shagged Rupert Murdoch's wife, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if he had a thing about, and I'm not going to mention the rest of it. Sorry. Because, of course, Tony Blair was accused of having an affair with Wendy Deng when she was married to Rupert Murdoch. Whether that was true or not, and again, I'm not making any accusations, but that was a story that was very prevalent at the time. And it broke up their marriage. According to the stories circulating in the palaces of Whitehall, Tony Blair was not only the Prime Minister that she would have liked to have named, but was sensible enough not to name, but that his tastes coincide with some of her specialties. Again, how true any of this is not something I would stake a farthing on, much less a pound, much less a lot of money. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. It turns out that according to the Giuffre version of things, that Peter Mandelson is the one who introduced Jeffrey Epstein and Tony Blair. The occasion seems to have been April 2022, when Tony Blair made a trip to the United States. There is a possibility that the date could actually be September 2002. If I said 2022, I meant 2002. And I'm afraid I'm not going to be correcting any of this. I'm just trucking along as we go along, because aside from anything else, I'm doped up to my eyeballs, and it's a huge effort for me to do this at all. And I'm afraid I'm just going to have to crave your indulgence if it turns out that I might have made an error, or let's go with the flow. So it's either April 2002 or September 2002. But the person to whom I spoke thought it was more likely to be April, because in the September, Tony Blair was rather busier. There were all sorts of things going on. And the person to whom I spoke feels that it's therefore more likely that the meeting took place in the April when everybody had a bit more time. I did point out to my person, let's say, that don't underestimate the need of a politician to have a release as well as relief, and at the busiest times possible to actually not only need but demand the surcease that comes along with, shall we say, breaking a very busy schedule with a shot of excitement and pleasure, and maybe even, or whipping yourself up or someone else into a frenzy of passion and enjoyment. I need to be careful how I put all of this. This is YouTube, number one. And number two, I'm not making any accusations against anyone. I'm simply telling you what is being discussed as we speak on the floors of the palaces of Westminster. Interesting, no? Tony Blair has had, especially at that time in question, he had strong links to the Middle East, and so did the Murdoch press. And Tony Blair and the Murdochs were very chummy at the time. Now, I no longer remember whether Tony Blair and Wendy Deng's friendship had spilt over into the public arena. I don't remember. But he evidently, whether he was discussing politics with Wendy Deng and enjoying himself with Virginia Giuffre, or whether this was just another of her many fantasies, is open to speculation. But the fantasy is that she and Tony Blair got together for a little bit of R&R. Well, spanky, spanky, wanky, wanky, coochie, coochie, coo, coochie, 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 coo, and we're going to enjoy ourselves. And not so much pleasure. Too much pleasure. A little bit more pleasure, please. I think you understand that I am being ridiculous for a good reason. So let us leave that as it is for the moment, because if it's Tony Blair who is the Prime Minister in question, that casts a whole different complexion upon the British media, and why the British media are so intent on obfuscating and so determined to keep Prince Andrew in the frame. Sorry, I need to drink water. I cannot tell you how dry my throat is. all this morphine is an absolute killer. I don't know how anybody could take any of this for anything except necessity. Aside from anything else, it dries out your throat so thoroughly. It's unbelievable. Well, as I was saying, this adds a whole new level of credulity and incredulity to the Prince Andrew business. It helps to explain an awful lot as to what is truly going on and why the mainstream media and the politicians are being collusive in their determination to keep the focus on Prince Andrew, who, let's remember, has never been charged with a crime, and whom Virginia Giuffre herself confirmed had not committed a crime in this country, but everybody is baying for his blood at the moment. Well, it's a heck of a lot more understandable why the British press is baying for Andrew's blood, because they don't want to bay for Tony Blair's blood, because all the Labour supporting publications are not going to head in that direction. On the other hand, heading in the direction of an unpopular royal is a no-brainer, to put it mildly. You know, in Sunday Times, there was a very interesting piece, I've got it here, by Rosie Kinchen, who has actually interviewed me. And she's a very good interviewer. I'm sorry, I'm in awful pain. I just have to readjust myself because I've moved my foot in a... Sorry about this, but it's late. I don't have the time except now, and what I need to do, I need to do. So I'm just working my way through this, shall we say, with determination. Rosie Kinchen makes the point in a full-page article called The Andrew Affair that Rina O was a 21-year-old art student when she was lured into the late, she says, paedophile. He was not a paedophile, he was an ephebophile. And I do wish they'd get that fact straight. Harem, alongside Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre is the one who lured her in. But now she is suing her fellow victim's estate, accusing her of fabricating stories about their ordeal. She has been suing her for some considerable length of time. I've covered this before. And this is extremely material as to the outcome of the Virginia Giuffre matter, because she makes it absolutely clear, and she is a credible witness, that that Jeffrey Epstein had some virtues, and that basically she doesn't think that Virginia Giuffre had many, if any. I mean, she makes it absolutely clear in her lawsuit that Virginia Giuffre was effectively a pathological liar who, yes, she believes she was originally a victim, but that original victimhood does not absolve her of responsibility for her later crimes and the extent to which she, Virginia Giuffre, set out to destroy other people and turn herself into something she wasn't, which was Epstein's victim. And she says that Virginia Giuffre simply lied about her involvement in the matter. And a lot of this centers around the book, the memoir that Virginia Giuffre wrote with Sharon Churcher, which, when it was written, it was promoted as if it were a matter of fact. And she says that much of the content of Virginia Giuffre's latest memoir is a cut and paste job of the previous memoir, which Virginia Giuffre was obliged to confirm in court was a fabrication, that she had invented things that had never taken place, or she had exaggerated things that had. And she said, and I'm going to quote, the final time she saw Giuffre was in the Red Room in New York. It was one of the occasions when she had brought a friend with her. Quotes, I knocked on the door, and then I opened the door and walked in and froze. I immediately knew this was an ambush. What, end of quotes. What happened was by now predictable. She claims she was, quote unquote, ambushed by two females at the same time while Epstein watched. Quotation, the last impression I had of Virginia was this girl had turned into one of the girls I hated the most, one of the massage therapists who ambushed me in that room. She says that for some considerable length of time, she was enabled by Jeffrey Epstein to pursue an artistic career, and that he even rented a New York apartment for her, which she subsequently leased out. And she said that when it became apparent that Giuffre had written this work of fiction, this is the previous work of fiction, I think it was written in 2011, I don't remember exactly when, but it was written something like that. And she discovered that she was in it, and that practically nothing in it was accurate. She has ended up suing Virginia Giuffre from when Virginia Giuffre was alive. And she continues the lawsuit against Virginia Giuffre's estate. Now, what is really interesting in all of this is that Virginia Giuffre's brother and sister-in-law and I think half-brother, are suing Virginia Giuffre's husband. They are trying to get their hands on the money that will be earned by Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir. And these are the people who are calling for Prince Andrew's further destruction, notwithstanding the fact that their father has been named by their sister as the architect, shall we say, of one of the most severe crimes that a man can commit against a woman. But that's fine. If the Roberts family want to devour each other and say anything about each other, whether true or false, they should be allowed to get away with it. But a member of the British royal family, of whom there is no proof whatsoever, and not even an indication that a crime was ever committed, should be pilloried. All of this is very important because the mainstream media have been quoting Virginia Giuffre in this latest mogrification of her earlier fantasies, as if Virginia Giuffre was a truly credible witness and that anything she said should be believed. And this young lady, Rina O, says, no, I'm suing her, and I'm now suing her estate because she defamed me. She is a liar. And most of what she said in both books, because evidently much of the first book is simply replicated, cut and pasted in the second book, turns out to be absolute lies. Now, I have done some checking into Rina O in the past, and she is credible. She admits where she was a part of, what she was a part of, and she accepts full responsibility for her actions without trying to convert herself into a victim when she wasn't, which is not what Virginia Giuffre did. Virginia Giuffre, who was, and I've said it before and I'm going to say it again, and I'm afraid if it upsets people, that's a price I'm going to have to pay. But I think it is my duty, not only as a Christian and as a human being, but as a reputable biographer, to insist that a source be questioned when that source's credibility has been validly called into question elsewhere. Now, I'm not the only person, and I'm glad to see, nor is Rosie Kinchen the only person. And I give full marks to the Murdoch organization for having published this article. And I hope it is the first of many. Now, if it turns out that Virginia Giuffre was speaking the truth, fine. But we need to ask the questions and have her credibility substantiated, not to accept as credible the word of somebody whom we already have incontrovertible proof, including out of her own mouth, that she was lying. Because with the previous book, she actually ended up admitting that she was lying. She had made things up. She had remembered post occasion recollections. Now, there's also a very interesting piece that was published on the 30th of October, which is worth mentioning, by Michael Tracey, Tracey, on a publication called UnHerd, UN, capital U, lowercase n, capital HERD, UnHerd. It is evidently a very centrist publication that is interested in getting to the truth, especially when the truth is being distorted by various elements in the mainstream media. And he has written an excellent piece, which has been brought to my attention by one of my legal geniuses, let's put it that way. And I'll read out the opening sentence. In the new posthumously released memoir, Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, by Virginia Giuffre, with ghostwriter Amy Wallace, the author makes a jarring admission. An earlier draft of the book, written in 2011 and pitched to publishers under the title The Billionaire's Playboy Club, offered a quote-unquote fictionalised narrative of the roughly 2 years Giuffre purports to have spent being trafficked and abused by Jeffrey Epstein. He makes the point that Nobody's Girl is generating global headlines and is, at the time that he was writing this, the number 4 ranked book across Amazon. Then he makes the point that allegations in the book are being taken as fact with profound consequences, particularly in Britain, owing to the claims involving Prince Andrew. This week, the new Statesman, Britain's leading centre-left weekly, published a cover essay calling for the abolition of the monarchy, in part over the allegations against Prince Andrew set forth in the book. Yet oddly, the full volume media coverage blaring across multiple countries has failed to examine the existence of the earlier memoir or its relation to the new one. Well, he makes the point that Giuffre was by far Epstein's most consequential accuser, and that while others had accused him of illicit activity of a carnal nature, it was she who first introduced the notion that Epstein orchestrated a sprawling child sex trafficking operation. The whole thing is her construct. And the civil litigation she initiated would ultimately produce an extensive documentary record that prosecutors seized upon in their case against Ghislaine Maxwell, who is now serving a 20-year prison sentence. He asserts that her chronology shifted over time, but Giuffre generally claimed she was lured into Epstein's employ in her teens. In about the year 2020, when she was 17, so she'd have been 19 in 2022, when she and Tony Blair connected. I make that point for what it's worth. Sorry for drinking some more water, but my throat is like the Sahara Desert. She was lured with a promise of work as a massage therapist. She claimed, according to him, that she was subsequently forced into the Sussex without the sus trade. She claims that after finally escaping Epstein's clutches, she'd go on to become an activist crusader in the cause of empowering sex trafficking victims. To question Giuffre's testimony is not to exonerate Jeffrey Epstein. This is the point I've made all along. Jeffrey Epstein was a sleazebag, and nobody's trying to let him off the hook. At least nobody in my world. But it is the responsibility of journalists to look forensically at the evidence, even if the findings may be unpopular. My sentiments exactly, and a point I've been trying to make. Giuffre's latest memoir is presented to the public as a work of non-fiction. She likewise originally presented the 2011 memoir as non-fictional, as confirmed by literary agents who were originally pitched the book. It was an expose of the sordid crimes of some of the world's most prominent politicians, academics, and business people, pitched as a human interest story that could appeal to the Oprah female set as well as the Wall Streeters who followed Epstein. However, when the draft manuscript was eventually excavated over the course of litigation Giuffre had initiated against Maxwell, a multiple of claims it contained became untenable to defend. Her lawyers were thus compelled to concede that the manuscript had represented wait for it, quote unquote, fictionalized account of her purported experiences. Remember, this is the woman who graphically described 6 ravishments at the hands of Alan Dershowitz, and when she was forced into confronting the reality of those memories by confirming them, she came up with it, well, maybe I misremembered. In court documents, the lawyers granted that Ms. Giuffre, I'm quoting, began to draft a fictionalized account of what happened to her. It was against this backdrop of her trauma being unearthed, her steps to seek psychological counseling for it, that she drafted this manuscript. Doing so was an act of empowerment and a way of reframing and taking control over the narrative of her past abuse that still haunts her. I want to make the point at this juncture that Virginia Giuffre has been given a tremendous amount of respect and credibility, notwithstanding the doubts that all reasoned people should possess as a result of her own admissions of her lack of credibility. And we are in the situation in this country at the moment where our monarchy is being threatened, and the existence of our monarchy is being threatened as a result of claims made by Virginia Giuffre about Prince Andrew, and I'm calling him Prince because that's what he was born. And it is utterly irresponsible of any respectable organ or organization in this country and any body of intelligence and discernment to accept as a factual Virginia Giuffre's account without balancing the fact that by her own admission, the contents of this book, which have already caused so much damage to our being the British people's state, is being allowed to stand as if there should be no questions asked. And whenever anybody asks questions, as I have done, and I point out the anomalies and the contradictions, I am accused of untoward behavior, and I'm accused of victim shaming when I'm not victim shaming, because Virginia Giuffre has acknowledged that she often lied. But her lies have been allowed to remain standing as if they were the truth. And to me, it is beyond belief that anybody of any note or repute who has a reputation to protect would actually think it is appropriate to take this woman's word without considering the fact that everything she has said should be called into question, because everything that she has previously said that is resonant, she herself has called into question by admitting was untrue. Now, I am not saying that Virginia Giuffre is not deserving of compassion and that she might well have not suffered at the hands of, shall we say, tormentors, since this is YouTube. I've never said that. What I have said is that Virginia Giuffre has admitted receiving money for services rendered, quantified the significant sums she has received, and that she was not under the age of consent in this country. And therefore, why has our political institution been dragged through the mud? And why is the stability of our nation being rocked to the extent it has been, and will continue to be, as long as people are irresponsible enough to consider it feasible to fail to call into question her bona fides, her credibility. She deserves pity and sympathy for the suffering she endured. She does not deserve pity and sympathy for the suffering she has caused others. That's my take on it. And people who don't want to hear it don't need to listen to me. They can turn me off. They can shut me out. They can shut me down. I'm sorry. I have a duty as a human being who believes in right and wrong to not allow the word of a confessed liar to be presented as the truth when that word is now being presented as the truth because the packaging is different, but the content is the same. I'm going to quote again because this is so important that it really needs to be addressed. In fact, I think this has gone on long enough. So I am going to now take a break from this and I am going to return to it tomorrow because I think this has gone on long enough and I really don't think I should continue it because this is going to become too lengthy, and if it is too lengthy, it is going to be problematic. So I crave your indulgence and ask you to bear with me, and I'll finish it tomorrow because aside from anything else, I am really in very bad shape because I am drugged up to my eyeballs and I am in a lot of pain. But I think it is my duty to address this. And since I'm one of the very few people who has been addressing this, and I'm delighted to see that we now have people like Michael Tracey and Rosie Kinchen are addressing it. I think it really is important, and I will wrap this up today with one of the quotes in the subsections because I think this says it all. It is the responsibility of journalists to look forensically at the evidence, even if the findings may be unpopular. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to see you tomorrow. Hopefully, your sympathies for Virginia the victim are not going to get the better of the sympathies you should have for those who are her victims. One can sympathize with a victim when they are a victim and not collude with their victimization of others when they become a perpetrator. Because really, what does that do? It means that those who collude with perpetrators are also collusive of perpetration. I hope you see where I'm coming from with this. This is such an important moral point that I don't think we can escape from it lightly. Thank you so much. Godspeed. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.